It is on.
That we serve an almighty God, and he commands us to care about the nation that we are in.
People need to be equipped on how to live out their faith in the public square.
Personal faith with Jesus is critical for your own health, but it's also critical for the national health.
They really tackle head-on all those really big issues no one wants to talk about.
You explained the difference, as you saw, between Aboriginal traditional religion and Christianity, saying they were incompatible. I actually tend to agree with you.
We're not hearing this stuff in our churches.
The most important thing we can do is to win souls for Jesus Christ.
They are cutting to the quick with the word of God.
The second most important thing is to make sure we can still do the first thing.
G'day and welcome to the Church and State Show. My name is Dave Pellowe, and we're flying by the seat of our pants here, trying to get as many interviews done as quickly as we can, having discussions with serious Australian thinkers about the question, how to save Australia. They're not all Christian, they're not all conservative, but I think they all contribute something to an important conversation, because we just have to acknowledge it's not okay. We're not going okay at all. But let me introduce our guest for this episode, the Reverend David Ould. David, so good to have you join us. Thank you.
Hi, Dave. Good to be with you again.
You've been very gracious to me this afternoon, adapting with the hecticness of me juggling plates going on. But this is live and organic. We're just going to have a fairly real conversation. Dave, can you just start by telling those who've not seen or heard of you before what you do and where people can find more about you?
Sure. Well, for the lucky ones who haven't seen or heard me, my name is David. I'm originally from the UK, married to Jackie, who's from Singapore. We got three children, two of whom are launching into adulthood. It just keeps creeping up on you, doesn't it, Dave? And I am Senior Associate Minister at St. John's Anglican Cathedral in Parramatta, which is the longest continual site of Christian worship in all of Australia. So that's my job. That's my role. Essentially helping out in what's a great team to be part of. In an Anglican church, right in the heart of original colonial Sydney. And then I write a bit online, so you can, my website, davidould.net, a bit of stuff on there. Take a bit of an interest in, what's going on in politics and how the gospel actually helps us think about these things. And also in the Anglican church in which I'm ordained, have spent some time writing about the things that go on there. It's variegated. I think that's the posh word to use. It's many different colours of Anglicanism in the Anglican Church of Australia.
I really like posh words. I think everybody needs more posh words to lift their communication skills, and that's the mission we're in.
I'll do the posh for you today, then, Dave.
I'll try and compete with you. See if you can get the most syllables in. The other thing I like is synonym. So, Dave, again, we're sort of flying by the seat of our pants here. So let me brief you on what we're going to do, which I probably should have done before I pressed the go live button. But it's pressed and it's started. So here we are. So the question is how to save Australia. I'm having in these conversations, and it's the same question for every single episode. This is the Church and State Show, but we're doing a series called How to Save Australia, and just having conversations with different people in my circle of moving and influence, people who can influence me, who I'm aware of, who I've got contact details with. We had Dave Rubin on recently, who's not necessarily the most erudite Christian scholar, but he has a perspective to offer and is definitely battling against the left and wokeism. So you being at the complete opposite end of your journey with God, a well-formed, mature Christian, I wanted to ask really the question of you, and the context for this conversation is the obvious either isn't being done or isn't being done well, and whatever is being done isn't working. the result being the paganization and the really the invitation for judgment and damnation on this nation from God. So, the church has been established and been present for a long time. So the question really is, you acknowledging this problem, observing the problem, how do you see it? Do you see it the same as me or differently to me? And then what are you doing that you think might be different, which God has called you to be part of the solution? Finally, before we wrap up half an hour to an hour, the goal is to then equip the viewer with, maybe not everybody can do what somebody else is doing, you or me, but or vice versa. But what do you think most people can do in view as practical steps that people could add to the battle to save Australia? So
sure.
Let's start with your observations or assessment of the depth of the problem. Where are we, and how would you describe it?
So I think defining the problem first is really, really helpful. Until you've worked out what's going wrong, you can't really say, here's what the solution is. Spoiler, I'm going to say the solution is Jesus, but in a number of different ways. Who'd have thought the Christian minister says that? What's the problem? Well, in one sense, I don't think the problem is quite as horrible and terrible existentially as some people might think, but then again, I want to say it is. Let me explain what I mean by that. Often in Christian fields, I find people going, "Oh, we're in the end times now. This is kind of, these are the signs of the ends." And I think the right response to that is to go, no, it's just another wave. It's just another cycle of the kind of nonsense that goes on generally in the world we live. The Bible tells us, and I think all the evidence demonstrates it, we live in a broken world, a world that's just gone wrong because of what the Bible calls sin, which is mankind's nature of just rebellion against God. We just want to decide for ourselves what's right and what's wrong. And so that manifests itself in our personal lives, obviously, and then it manifests itself in the way that we live together in communities and even in nations. So in one sense, I want to go, we've been in far worse places before in our civilization, perhaps not in Australia, but Australia has a fairly short history. But the main we're downstream culturally and historically, aren't we, really, mainly from the UK and from Western Europe. And in those places, there's been far more profound moments than the moment that we're in. So in one sense, I want to go, it's okay. These things come and go. But then, having said that, we are in a particularly interesting moment, and we're really at almost the cusp of, some people might even just go, paganism as a philosophical, just an assumed philosophy of where we're at. For most of its history, in the sense that we could call it the West has been incredibly influenced by Christianity, and that I think is utterly undeniable. And most recently, two books, one meatier and one a little bit more on the popular level, but no less helpful for it, have demonstrated that. The first, of course, is Tom Holland's Dominion, where Tom Holland just does a magnificent job of showing us how who we are in the West has flowed out of the Christian gospel, the Christian good news about what God has done in Jesus Christ, and all the kind of stuff that goes along with that. And sometimes we forget that Christianity has this profoundly deep and rich philosophical heritage. You go back to guys like Aquinas and Augustine, and the Reformation itself was an incredible moment, wasn't it? Of just people thinking these things through. And so what Tom Holland shows so well is the things that we just take for granted they're axiomatic. They just are the way that they are. They're not. Then, like, we're not the Roman Empire. We're something radically different to Rome. So the notion of human rights, individual human rights, that people have value in and of themselves, Christian view, comes out of the view that we're all made in the image of God, and so everybody has equal worth and value because of that. And so we're looking to the weak, and we're looking to lift them up instinctively. We instinctively do that when people use their powers of authority to abuse other people for their own benefit. We instinctively go, Oh, that's wrong. That didn't come from nowhere. That came because we've been profoundly influenced culturally. If you lived in the Roman Empire 2,000 years ago, you just wouldn't think that way. There were just different sorts of people, and like the slaves are the slaves. That's just who they are. They're there to serve me. I happen to be a slave master, whatever it might be. Right? All these different things. So one, we're profoundly influenced. And Tom Holland, of course, not a Christian, although very sympathetic towards Christianity, I think, as a result of doing this historical research. The other book I think it's really worth reading is Glenn Scrivener. He's an Australian living in the UK. He's done the reverse to what I've done. He's written a book, fantastic book called The Air We Breathe. Which is making the same argument. This is the air that we breathe instinctively. It fills our lungs, our philosophical lungs, every breath, and so on. All of that showing us where we were. And I think, what's the problem? Well, the problem is we've arrived at a moment where we've forgotten that. As simple as that. We've just forgotten it, and we're no longer assuming things about how the world works that we used to as a Western society. And that happened, and it's important for us to say this. Immigration will be something we'll talk about, no doubt, but that has happened independent of the immigration issue. That has been a philosophical shift across the West. It's changed the way we view immigration, which is really interesting, but it has been a philosophical shift across the West that would have happened whether or not you've got all those other side issues going on. That's the big problem that we're facing today. And so we're unmoored. The chain has broken from the anchor. The foundations of the house have cracked. Use whatever metaphors you want. We're kind of in that moment, and we're just slowly seeing the effects of it. But most people don't understand what the problem is. It's like most homeowners, right? When something goes wrong in your house, you have no idea why it's happened. But it's only if you get to the root of cause of what it is that you can find out what's happened. And so we're in this shifting transition moment, and not just us in Australia. That's clearly going on across what you might call Western society in its broader sense.
I think you're spot on. It's an interesting observation that for sure the multiculturalism experiment has reached an extreme which was never sustainable, care of mass immigration. And yet it's the forgetting of our values, our history, our foundations, our identity itself, which has lowered the defenses and had a false virtue in multiculturalism and the endless diversity of values which are brought in without discrimination, as if discrimination. Without discrimination. When I say that, some people might think, well, without discrimination is good, but you don't do your personal shopping for the food you eat without discrimination. You don't put fuel in your car at the Bowser without discrimination. Being very careful about the ingredients that go into our continued operation, both as a body biologically and mechanically. We understand that certain ingredients can be very, very harmful if you lack all discrimination. So another word for that might be without any judgment, without any wisdom, without any standard. And clearly we can't bring endless amounts of incompatible cultures in without having a detrimental effect. But would we have if we knew what our culture was, if we knew what our foundation was, and we knew that's a very precious thing?
Yeah, and so I this is a vexed question for me, and I mean that seriously. Like I've been. Many of us on the conservative wing have been thinking this through a lot more recently, and obviously it's been sort of elevated into the headlines and the common consciousness through the marches that happened, I think, a month or two ago, and I think there'll be more that will happen soon. So I think the touch point where I'm with you on is that word values that you used before, because it's not. Culture is kind of the lead thing in multiculturalism, is the lead thing in, but what it actually is a conversation about values. So I don't know if you've had Stephen Chavura on yet. Steve obviously been in the paper recently, just a scurrilous attack upon him. Let me just be really, really clear. And Steve is one of the brightest, sharpest guys that I have met. A very, very astute historian. Steve's argument is that we need to make sure that we are retaining what he calls our Anglo-Celtic culture. And what he's tapping into is that thing that we spoke of before, which is where it came from. But Steve's argument, I think, would be it needs to be even tighter. There's a particular cultural thing that is sort of the Anglos like me and where I came from with my posh words and so on. But I've discussed this a little bit with Steve online, and I'm not quite sure that's the argument that I want to make. And let me go at it from two directions for you. One, I think just a realpolitik, that ship has sailed. That ship has sailed. So whatever it was that we're not anymore. And so just like the Hegelian thing, there's going to be, we're going to end up somewhere different. I think that's true. But see, here's the other thing that's really, and this is why Jesus is the answer, not just culture.
Amen.
Here's the other thing that's getting to me. I have the privilege of,
like we're in Sunday school, David. That's always the right answer.
Jesus is always the right answer. That's right. You know, the Sunday school story of the guy who goes, what's looks like a rat, got a big bushy tail and stores nuts in the window. The little kid goes, look, it sounds like a squirrel, but the answer must be Jesus. So, but I have the privilege of being a pastor at this church, and can I just say, I'm the token white guy there. The congregation that I pastor is the largest people group is from the south of India. Loads of guys who love Jesus. We've got in my growth group that I meet with every week, I've got a couple of Anglos from Australia. I can just think of a girl from a mainland Chinese background, some Nigerians, an Indonesian guy that's there. You get the point that I'm making, right? Mm-hmm. Now, and then in our afternoon congregations, a whole bunch of young people. So we're talking university students, guys in their 20s, in our 11 o'clock congregation in their 20s or in their 30s, all from massively different ethnic backgrounds, all thoroughly united in the gospel of Jesus Christ. So Jesus forming this cohesive culture of people, which is why when I hear Stephen's argument, I just go, mate, I'm just not sure I'm with you, especially not here in the west of Sydney where we both are. I think if the gospel is what made Western society what it is, then it's the gospel that will help us see how to live together now that we're not just Anglo-Celts. If that makes sense to you, like, and I'm not wanting to at that point do down like the British, the Anglo-Celt heritage of the UK. Like I can see the corner of the Union flag in our national flag there, and that's a significant part of who we are. And as a Brit myself, you know, love it. Just the other day, you know, I was just saying to our guys when the national anthem was played at the footy, the grand final. What a great grand final that was. We're all standing for the national anthem, right? You know, these you know, heritage and tradition, they're all important, right? Amen. But it's just not who we are as Australia anymore. And I think there's ways of having the conversation or of trying to think through this. What is this gospel-shaped Christian heritage that we can retain? Now, I think that still means we need to ask some hard questions about who's coming into the country. And what we're setting forward to them as Australian values. But the real problem is the Australian values that we're setting out before them are, as we said before, they've been unhitched from that Christian background. But that's the conversation that needs to be had. Like, who are we? How did we become who we are? And then the more that we as a society understand that, even if you're not going to church on a Sunday, come to church, but you know, even if you're not, do you get where that comes from? And do you get why that's a good thing? And do you get why that shaped who we are? And do you get why that's worth defending? And you get why that actually means we need to have some brave, careful, responsible conversations about people who believe other things and whether we want to allow those voices to be dominant in our culture.
So here's the trick. freedom doesn't take a long time to accomplish. A revolution, an assassination of a tyrannical king. You can achieve freedom quickly, relatively. Freedom to be ordered takes as long as it takes to have a series of constitutional conventions, maybe months, maybe years. So the accomplishment of freedom is relatively simple. The ordering of freedom is a little bit more time consuming, but the sustaining of freedom is the thing that has to be continued for generations and for centuries. And that is the thing that is complicated by an indiscriminate immigration policy and multiculturalism itself. I mean, the very word of multiculturalism should be offensive to anybody who believes there's such a thing as truth. Now, if you mean multi-ethnicism, well, that's fine. I love everybody equally. Obviously, I love people in my own family more than I love the neighbors. Maybe I just love them differently, but I'd certainly be, I don't want to get off on a tangent. The point really is that multiculturalism essentially says that all truths are equal, that all values are equal, that all cultures are equal, because culture is not sacred. Culture is man-made, unless your culture is to pursue the kingdom mind of God with a rigorous pursuit and value. But you know, the things that we've started to sanctify culture in this nation, like somebody's diet preferences, historical songs, and even their religious beliefs are somehow things that can't be insulted, criticized, mocked, ridiculed, challenged, or debated. But that's not something that is sacred, like the level of melanin in your skin tone. That's something that's man-made, and to even make such a truth claim is to assume there's some things that shouldn't be debated.
Yeah, Dave. I think what you're getting to is that I still don't think we've got good language to have this conversation yet, if that makes sense. So
let's build it.
Well, yeah, let's do it. So, but I think part of what we need to learn to do at least is define our terms, and what you're doing there, I hear you say, is taking a word and going, here's what I understand how that word is being used, not just what the word means. Because in one sense, multiculturalism, I step outside my door here where I live in the west of Sydney, and I come across multiple cultures in one sense, right? And it's actually a really, really good thing. And I don't want a monochrome world. And as a Christian, I don't want it. As a Christian, the great vision, the end vision that's given to me is of this crowd of people gathered around the throne of Jesus. And they're from, I mean, the Bible says literally from every tribe, tongue, nation, people.
So I don't even accept that that's as indisputable as you might imagine or want me to. Like, I think that's still a subjective preference, not an objective truth. And let's make multiculturalism at the very shallow end of the spectrum, where it's only diverse, cuisine and song experiences and preferences.
Sure.
I really do appreciate the beauty of other cultures. Subjectively, I'd like to spend the most time in my culture and have selected and controlled choice over when I'm immersed in other people's culture.
Okay, so again, it's the language, isn't it? It's the language that we're using, and we're trying to work out what we mean by this and what the boundaries are. So
here's the problem. I think the problem is that the word isn't defined, and whatever the most benign, most positive expression of multiculturalism might be, it's become a defense for any definition of multiculturalism, which includes the most pernicious, most malign, most wicked and deceitful ideas. And all of a sudden, if you don't tolerate the worst expressions of multiculturalism, you're some kind of horrible person that doesn't appreciate the best expressions of multiculturalism.
Well, let's see if you and I can find some. Let's see if you and I can find some points of contact. Then I know we have many, but let me try and sort of get to a point where I go, okay, this is where we're at, and I think we're on the same thing. So yes, just an unfettered acceptance of every single culture, not just in the sense that I want to be welcoming and kind to people, but that I have no discernment about whether one culture or another morally or philosophically is in a better place. And I think we need to be brave enough to have those conversations. That's not going to help us, and that's why we've ended up where we're at the moment. Why have we ended up there? Well, because actually we've lost sight. This is the thing I said at the start. We've lost sight of who we actually are and where we have come from, and this thing actually that many people want to be part of. See, what's really interesting is when I took Stephen. Let's go back to Stephen, that good guy that he is. Stephen gets criticized for using this phrase. We've got this Anglo-Celtic culture that we want people to adhere to or appreciate and whatever. I went to my wife, who's Chinese from Singapore, and I said to her, when you hear that, does that make you feel that you're not welcome in Australia? And her response is, nah, it just tells me what I already know, which is that if I come from one place to another place, I should just expect reasonably that I'm going to have to change and fit in with how that place is now. But which is, it's a sensible thing, right? As opposed to saying they must bend towards me. What we've done in Western society is we've lost our sense of how good that place was. See, that's what I keep coming back to. You keep saying, what's the ultimate solution? I go, Jesus, and understanding him and all that he's done to shape who we are. Because as we lose sight of that, we then just go, oh, well, it's just one option amongst many. But actually, we want to be regaining this confidence where we go, no, the whole way that we do everything has been shaped by that. And we lose that. We lose that at our peril. You know, I've sat with MPs and had this conversation, and a number who I think quite rightly now would be careful about how they vocalized it in public. But I can think of speaking with one person recently where they just went, yeah, this is quite obvious. And it's not a person you would expect to be saying that in terms of where their party's at, but it's going, no, this is quite obvious, and so there are people of goodwill across the.
Can you please specify for me? Spell it out. What did they think was quite obvious?
Oh, that our Australian society is built on a how would they put it? I want to be fair to them, a Christian culturally Christian or Christianly cultural background. Like, you look at the way our laws are expressed and what we value, because ultimately law is just an expression of the things that we value, right? Yeah. That's why when people push for different laws...
I'm with you. I don't know if this is a premature time to interrupt, but I don't care about Anglo-Celt as much as I care about Christian. If Anglo-Celt includes Druidism, God redeem my culture, change it radically. If Anglo-Cult is the cross of St. George and we love the gospel of Jesus Christ, I think absolutely every culture should be capable of embarrassment upon reflection of any misalignment with the gospel, the kingdom of God, and the character of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, well, let me just give you some concrete examples. So again, I speak about the church that I have the privilege of being a pastor at, but I go to our services and I just see a group of people literally from all over the world, and there are some in each congregation. There are some blocks of people. So in the one that I pastor specifically myself, the majority group, like I said, is South Indian, and that's just the birds of a feather thing, you know, they flock together. But in other congregations, that flocking together works in different ways. So in other congregations, for example, we've got a 530 congregation, I've got a whole bunch of people who are in their 20s who have come together because they are that group of people from the west of Sydney, which is made up of people who the parents came from everywhere, and they're now this new culture in the west of Sydney. And yet each of those heavily infused with with the gospel and the gospel shaping them, and people who aren't converted walking to this community going, oh, there is something different here. There's something phenomenally different here, and it's a good thing, and I like it. And look how it's holding together this ridiculously diverse group of people. I mean, if I get a politician, I'd have just 2 minutes with them. I just say, come to church and see the most cohesive, largest multicultural group of people in your electorate. They're with us under one head, the Lord Jesus Christ, who has changed them and shaped them. And it has its moments, right? You know, and I'm still learning about how people from different backgrounds view different ways. And just because we're Christian doesn't mean we don't also have our own sort of other cultural things as white people, you know, as well as everybody else. But there's something remarkable going on there. I was just yesterday evening, we were at what's called a Sangeet, which is a pre-wedding celebration for a young man who is from one of the states in India. Well, his parents are from one of the states in India, having this Sangeet. But he's marrying a girl who's a Chinese background girl. And they had this Sangeet, and I got dressed up in my kurta. If you know what that is, I look pretty schmick, I got to tell you. And there was a bunch of clearly Northern Indian cultural things going on. And then they asked the pastor from our church to stand up and tell people the good news from the parable of the Good Samaritan. And I was asked to on the spot to stand up and give them a spot of marriage advice. And so I stand up and I say, love your wife like Christ loved the church. And you let him love you. Submit to that loving and forgive him because he's not Jesus. And do you know who cheered loudest? That group of people in their 20s that I've just spoken to you about, who've come from, whose parents have come from all over the world, who have been profoundly shaped by the gospel, and who are an absolute delight to be part of pastoring. So there is an opportunity, I wonder, to grasp a vision for Australia that is variegated in its ethnicity, and yet still rooted in that gospel Christian culture, because that's what made us, and that's what made us the nation that other people wanted to come to. And I think if we can work out a way to have that good conversation, and these are the existential, questions that Western nations are asking themselves, and we're hearing now increasingly asked, and the UK is going through its own turmoil, and America as well, and Western Europe and so on. If we can work out in Australia with its very particular mix, we can work that out somehow. That would be remarkable. Now, can I shift on to my however moment?
Yeah.
However, David, as I argued at the Church and State Conference up in Brisbane with you, I think a year or so ago, no, a couple of years ago now, as Christians, the default assumption of the Bible is that we're not in power, and we actually live in a pagan state that hates us and hates the gospel. So this is why I come back to the thing I said at the start, right? Which is same old. We've been here before. We'll be here again. So, and I wanted to say that after having said what I really, really desire for our nation. So I desire for a nation that's thoroughly influenced by the gospel, as we have been in the past, that understands that values that, and sees the goodness in it. But I just want to keep wanting to say to Christians, that is a bizarrely strange, almost not unbiblical, but it's not the norm that the Bible assumes we're going to be in. Yeah. So we just need to be thinking through what that looks like as we seek to have influence. What are we assuming things about our right to have influence that maybe we don't have? And there's complexities to go there. I mean, I don't buy the Christian nationalism argument. I mean, you've got to define which version of Christian nationalism. Anyway, but I'm just, in general, I'm not persuaded by that. Not because I'm not a nationalist. I love my country of birth, the UK, and I love my new citizenship, Australia. The Ashes are a torment for me. Not that I don't love a nation, and not that I don't want Christian things. I think I've argued very much for that. But I don't see in the Bible. That that's a must and something we ought to insist upon. So again,
I find you, however, unimpressive. I just like, so what? I mean, that's where we are now. How do we apply biblical principles to where we are now? Obviously, democracy is the exception in human history. I said as much in one of my recent presentation sermons. Like, but what does God expect from government? And here's the reality. Demos means rule of the people. We are the rulers. We exert our power. Now, we can jump into the theories about whether they're selected or elected and those other things, but all that serves to do, that conversation really serves to do, is disenfranchise and disengage you and disempower you. So do your best to participate in the system and the opportunities that we have, certainly in prayer and warfare. But
so don't hear me say we're not engaged and we're not participating.
No. Let me just the best political scripture I know is the prayer of Solomon, where he says, God, I am so inexperienced. I'm like a child. I don't know where to come in or where to go out. And you've given me this great nation of yours, and I'm following in the footsteps of this great king and servant of yours who ruled this great people of yours. But I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. Zero political experience. Would you please give me the wisdom to know the difference between right and wrong, so I can judge, or in our case, vote with righteousness and wisdom and justice, and discern the difference between right and wrong. If we approach politics like that, it wasn't just a generic prayer for wisdom that Solomon prayed. It was a specific prayer for government administrative wisdom to govern. And like, if churches preach that, if pulpits preach that, if Christians preach that and exercise that, God, we want to administrate this opportunity and this political influence, multiplied as it is across 26 or 15 million voters. We want to represent you in the kingdom of God and the best wisdom that heaven has to offer. That doesn't fit into any ism at all. I don't want to be, I want to be a slave to Jesus. David, exactly like you said, Jesus is the answer. It's like, I don't want to be Anglo-Celtic. I don't want to be conservative. I don't want to be Christian nationalist. A line I've started saying a lot is that if there's 26 million people in Australia, God's ideal government is 26 million theocracies, where each of us have this personal relationship with God, and he is our king personally. And the need for civil authority disappears when you've got 26 million theocracies.
Well, that's when Jesus comes back, I think. So there is an ism. So Dave, let me do a yes and no with you as always. Can I just say I so appreciate you, David, because you have invited me onto things like this and onto church state and other, knowing that when I get up there, I very rarely totally toe the party line amongst your core audience. And I kind of say I do appreciate you, and I appreciate your desire to be prompted and stirred by people that you agree on fundamentals with, and then there's other things where we don't. And so I please don't hear me not enjoying this, and thank you for that. Yes and no. Yes, in one sense, 26 million theocracies. But here's the thing: when I hear someone talk about Solomon's prayer, I want to go, yes, but not a theocracy. That was Old Testament Israel for a particular time and purpose, in order to prefigure. Well, I think my reading of the Bible is, and we'll get into how Israel works in the Bible, but let me just tell you where I'm coming from. To prefigure the church. Solomon as a king figure is what we call a type. He models and sets up the king of the church, Jesus himself. And so in Solomon, you've got kind of wow, we're actually going to be preaching through some of those moments later next year, having just planned my preaching series for next year at church. So I'm already excited about them. But it's about, as I understand it, it's about the head of the church, the king, who ultimately will see fail. And so we go, oh, if only Israel could have a king that never failed. Guess what? They do end up, spoiler, they end up getting one.
Yeah.
But the plea for wisdom, yeah, absolutely. So Solomon, famously, for a bunch of the wisdom literature that's in the Bible, and wisdom in the scriptures, is knowing how to live in the creation because we know the creator and we know his intention for the creation, and that by its nature is it's practical in terms of how we live, but it's also gospel infused. As you go through a whole bunch of Solomon's prayers, you kind of get the creation and the gospel intertwining as they should. Now, let me. I'm a preacher. I'm on a roll. But when I turn to the New Testament, I actually see, and you can go back to my my talk at Church Instead a couple of years ago for this, but you actually see a shift that goes on. The Christian now understands that even though they consider themselves to be the fulfillment of Israel, they're now, if you like, living in exile. That's the predominant model from the Old Testament that's used in the New Testament. We live with a government that's not godly. And so what do we learn about that government? Some very clear things. When Paul writes in Romans 13, he says the government is instituted by God. It's there to reward good and punish the evildoer. It needs to do that. When Paul writes to Timothy, who's in Ephesus, he says to him, 1 Timothy 2, you need to pray for kings and all in authority, really that we can live godly and peaceful lives. The freedom to, which ultimately I think is the freedom to tell other people the gospel. That's what it's for. Absolutely. Now, at that point, I go, well, if we want governments to reward good and punish evil, we ought to be speaking into it. So this is the point where I do go, get involved, join a political party. So I've hosted stuff at the cathedral where we've had John Anderson and others come along and just say, join a political party, get involved, because like it or not, that is the heartbeat of the decisions that are going to get made. So get into your local, this is not branch stacking, this is just being involved. Get involved, be part of the conversation, be part of the group of people who says, actually, no, we're thinking about things in a different way, and we think they need to be worked out this way. I'm still a conservative, or I'm still a lean towards the left politically, or whatever it may be, but I'm appreciating that Australia came from this background, and I think we need to work consistently with that works best. Be part of the conversation. And the other thing I want to say is, more broadly, and I think we might come to this tipping point in Australia in a bit. We've arrived at it back in the UK. It's been really interesting, hasn't it, watching the last 2 or 3 years in the UK. They've reached a tipping point on stuff. And they've had some crises, and there needs to be sensible people, not just the chattering classes and those of us who are trying to be at that level, but just as we talk to our friends, as we sit at the pub and share and have a beer with each other, whatever it may be, who are just normalizing again conversations about who we are, why are we the way that we're at. Isn't it interesting that actually we get our beliefs from here? They seem to have been done good. You can have all sorts of positive conversations without having to be negative about anything else. I mean, that's part of the conversation, don't get me wrong, but you can talk about who we are and so on. And I think that's what you want. Practical things. If you're not clear on it, get clear on it. So read some books. Go and read Tom Holland. It's worth the read. Maybe get your toes wet with Scrivener's The Air We Breathe first of all. Go. Oh yeah, this is who we are. This is where we came from, and then start to normalize the acceptance and the goodness of that goodness amongst the people. I think again, Steve, isn't it again, who called it courage culture. But even before that, just normalize it. Talk again about why Australia, what made Australia this brilliant nation that all these millions of people want to come to. Let's talk about it. Let's get it spread out. And I want to say, as you do that, and as you realize that it actually is the Christian heritage of Australia and other nations. If you haven't already worked out who Jesus is, can I just say, if he's so good that the thing that happened from him has been so good in so many places, then why don't you find out a little bit more about him?
Yeah, good.
and come and do that. And there are churches all over this nation who would love to. There are Christians who'd love to talk to you about it. And if you're a Christian, I want to say to you, remind yourself the influence that Jesus has had, not just in individual lives, not just in those 26 million theocracies, but in whole nations, that has moved them in certain ways, and that is not least an excuse to talk about the goodness of Jesus,
and
the way he shaped who we are. But can I just say, we're at this cusp moment, I think, in Australian society where people are thinking about these things, and like it or not, they're increasingly on the agenda. We need to find ways of talking about the goodness of Jesus, and cultural decay and shift it's a gimme because it's wound up in it.
Yeah, you're right. In case it needs spelling out, when I say 26 million theocracies, I'm actually trying to refute the allegation and false accusation that I'm interested in imposing some kind of religious devotion via the power of government. What I'm in favor of is people choosing Jesus, and being capable of and skilled at freedom through excellence in training and devotion, which you get from faith and from Christianity.
And Christianity, let me just interrupt. Christianity, by its nature, inherently in its texts, it spreads by persuasion, and it spreads with a confidence that God will spread it as he sees fit. So it's really interesting as you read the history of the early church in the book that's called Acts in the New Testament. You've got the 4 Gospels, and immediately you got it's called the Acts of the Apostles traditionally, but really it's the Acts of Jesus through his first followers. You get these remarkable moments where people you may have heard of, like Peter and Paul, stand up and they preach, and then you get texts like, all those that were appointed to be saved were saved on that day. So God just does this work as we persuade, and Paul is famous for going to the Areopagus, the debating chamber of his day, and just going, here's an idea for you, Jesus, this bloke, he rose from the dead, and some of them go, you're a lunatic, and others go, this is interesting, let's talk some more about that. So the unlike other religious groupings, Christianity has always been spread by persuasion. And actually, we've got in a mess when we've tried to legislate belief, as opposed to legislating the goodness of ways of behaving, if that makes sense. So it's just fine again, and this is why it's a difficult debate, but that's where I'd be going, is what we need to be thinking about.
I think I've missed the bit where you think I'd have a problem with what you were saying.
No, I don't. I feel the need to disagree with you on something.
Me for being so bold as to engage in a conversation with you. I relish the to and fro, and that's I think we're I don't even know how to. There's we're not poles apart on anything, I think.
No, no, we're not.
But there's there's also just the benefit in skill in reflecting on the nuances we might mean and not say or whatever. But
I see the political right going through this stage at the moment of actually trying to work some of those nuances out. That would be my observations. I've had the privilege of seeing some of the conversations that some on the right are having, and trying to be a little bit involved myself and so on. And I think what I see is there's this working out, isn't there? I think that's going on as we grapple with these things, and we go, well, what is the consequence? And so again, that's why I'm so grateful for guys like Stephen Chavura, who will prepare to stick their head above the parapet, take the hits. And this sounds like the Stephen Chavura show, only because I just think now today is the week we need to be with guys like that. We need to be going, good on you, what nonsense you've gone through. I had some stuff happen to me just a short while ago where we had the first round of the protests, those marches, and I wasn't even, I'm not sure we should be doing this, and it became quite obvious the Nazis were going to show up and might have some influence, and I remember saying to a bunch of people, but then I said, but it is interesting, isn't it? Immediately after the march, when everyone was like, oh, well, see, the Nazis did show up, I said, yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? But here's the question I think we need to ask. Why did a bunch of people go even though they knew that was going to happen? They're not all Nazi supporters. Why did a bunch of people from this variegated ethnic community that we have now, from all sorts of people, why did they show up even though they knew those guys were going to be there? Now, for saying that, I got told a number of things. I got told that I was Nazi adjacent and, you know, ultimately supportive of the Nazis and whatever. I'm like, which bit of this are you not listening to? And personally, it maddens me. My grandfather was confessing.
I think there should be an IQ test for social media accounts.
Oh, mate. But I'll put up with much, but I won't put up with that. My grandfather was confessing church. Who were the guys that were with Bonhoeffer when Hitler goes to the Lutheran church in Germany? He goes, actually, I'm the head of the church, and a bunch of them go, no, I think that job's taken by someone else. And you know, my grandfather's got his personal
his name
story.
Is Jesus.
That's right. My grandfather's got his personal story, and you know, I don't think I'd be here today, let me just say, if another very brave man had not warned my grandfather one evening that the Gestapo were coming, and so I got no time for the Nazis. The guys that say, for example, I shouldn't be married to my wife because she's from a different ethnicity, and got no time for it. Got no time for it at all. But I've made some of that argument here today. So I won't have that nonsense. But it's really interesting, isn't it, that we just can't. As soon as we try and have these conversations, immediately this stuff comes in, and we get told this. And Stephen's on the ball where he goes, we just need courage to continue to have them. So I want to say to people, if you want to make a difference, one of the things you need to do is just have the conversations and have them well, and be prepared to go, I don't know quite, but here's the stuff I do know. I'm exploring this stuff. Here's what I'm understanding is good about Australia and where that goodness has come from. You know, but I'm a preacher, so I've repeated myself now.
Well, at least you don't have 3 points that alliterate.
No, not on this one. Not on this one, because you only briefed me right before. But
I know. This is off the cuff, unscripted conversation, which hopefully people are loving about it. Well, we're nearly going for an hour, so let's try and wrap it up. Let me see. What do I want to say? I want to agree with you. And I mean, I'm devoting my energy to this narrow goal, which is, you know, all of the nuance and things that the right wing are trying to figure out. Fantastic. We need to have those conversations. They're not the conversation that's going to save Australia. The conversation that's going to save Australia, as you've wonderfully said, is to point people back to our Christian foundation, our Christian heritage, our Christian legal system and traditions inherited from Britain. These are the things that, and it is the basics that we can all teach. It is the basics to say to people, get married, have babies, go to church, learn about God. That is your identity. That is your history. That is the future of wealth, peace, prosperity, security, and liberty, justice in this nation. If you want Australia to be great, become a Christian and go to church and make sure that those values are the values you understand, learn, and promote. You have to go to church and you have to be discipled, because otherwise people will capture you with their winds of doctrine and vain imaginations and debates about trivialities that don't matter and mire you down. In the meantime, what you need to know more than anything else was reflected in our Constitution: humility beneath the blessing of Almighty God, instead of elevating your own opinion above that of God's. The arrogance besetting this nation right moment to throw parades for pride in sin. I mean, this is the fundamental problem that a reformation of the church preaching the undiluted gospel is going to be if there's a silver bullet, that's it. There isn't, but we absolutely need to be a nation that returns to God in the common and popular affections of the people with the power, which is the voters.
Yeah, and so I almost want to go almost more fundamentally underneath it all, a view of who people are and how we relate to each other. So, you know, again, I mentioned it earlier on, this notion that if I'm made in the image of God, if I'm made in the image of God, and that gives me immense value, if I can see every single person as a marred picture of God, so the original image is there, but it's marred.
A
But
fractured
it's also,
reflection.
yeah, but also if the cross of Jesus actually, do you know how culturally that has driven who we are? The notion that actually the strong ought to do something for the weak, the notion that there is a place for forgiveness and restoration, difficult as that may be, the notion that I might put myself out for other people, the notion that actually I might be created for community. One of the tragedies of the last sort of 20, 30 years is everyone turning in on themselves. I mean, the social media, hides stuff on social media is fascinating, isn't it? But you can see it around us. You get on, everyone's on their phones and whatever. I'm guilty. I realize, even as I say it, I'm terribly guilty of it myself. But no man is an island. Well, 26 million islands are quite possibly. So,
Yeah,
but the notion that we're made by God and we're made for a relationship one with another, and these are good things, and just getting back to that, when the founders in America wrote into their declarations, that humans are endowed by their creator with inalienable rights. That's floating. They're going, we're made by God, and that means certain things are true. If you no longer believe that is true, then what you find is that the things that flow from that you no longer believe are true as well. And you can kind of live on the assumption that they are true for a while, but ultimately you find that it just starts to fade away. And when you ask people, well, on what basis is it wrong to do certain things, or what does make that action right, you find that they're just like, well, it just is, right? And you go, no, we gotta do better than that. We've got to know why we are who we are.
Yep, absolutely. Dave, is it too long of a rabbit trail to go down to discuss the new Archbishop of Canterbury?
Well, possibly. Like, we're nearing the hour. I have distilled my response to that into 3 letters: meh. She is the embodiment, I think, of many of the things that we've spoken about and how they've actually influenced the Church of England. I think I want to say that. No surprise that she was in the position she's in. We've probably got the most under theologically educated Archbishop of Canterbury we've had for a long time. That troubles me. I think we need to be making, as Christians, as Anglican Christians, we need to make a lot of that. She has limited theological education. She's a brilliant administrator. I just read an article yesterday. The lanyard, isn't like the lanyard Archbishop or the lanyard appointment. I'll maybe drag out the link and send it to you afterwards. I think that's like, in one sense, it's a nothing burger for me and the people that I associate with in the Anglican Church. We have long ago said the Archbishop of Canterbury has, the previous one had wrecked that office and what it stood for. We were wondering if we might get an appointment that might make some effort to hold people like us and all across the communion in place. By choosing a woman, of course, you've chosen someone that many people, because of their their conservative theological position, just can't accept in that position. And you've done it knowingly. She was the obvious candidate, once a ship is sinking, if there's another hole in it, it really doesn't make, if the iceberg had hit another Titanic, a little mini iceberg a little bit later, it would have made no difference. We'd have just gone, oh, that's interesting. So I look at that and I go, well, that's interesting. Meh.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess the shorter question I want to answer, and we do got to wrap up. So I appreciate the three letter distillation of your response, but the question is, how does Anglicanism go on given its hierarchy is so unreflective of its majority?
Look. Globally, we've been ignoring the center for a while, and we've been setting up our new center. So I've been at the last number of what's called GAFCON movements, the Global Anglican Future Conferences. So we, for a while, as Anglicans, we've just gone now. So when this happened, we just gone, well, that's interesting, but almost not my Archbishop of Canterbury. Like I just don't really like. We've got a chairman of our primates council at GAFCON, the primate of Rwanda, Laurent Mbanda. I'm far more interested in what he's got to say, because he seems to be clearly believing the same gospel that I believe, which Christians have believed for 2,000 years. Let me just say one thing about this appointment. One thing that we are noticing in churches across the West is young men coming back to think about Christian things. I think they're coming back primarily for political and cultural reasons, for the things that I've mentioned before. They're noticing that they're seeing that the conservatism that they want has its Christian basis. I think we've got to be very careful, therefore, that we don't sell them conservatism. We actually sell's the wrong word. We give them Jesus and just go, actually, you're going to find he's a far more complex person to follow than the political framework that you wanted to follow. But this appointment in Canterbury is not going to make them go, oh, great, I'm back to the Church of England. Like, it's anyway. They made their decision. They made the decision. They literally made their bed.
Super glad to hear that she has next to no relevance to the daily, weekly operations of your pastorship and congregation.
Nothing at all. Oh well, I mean, when it's on the cycle to pray for her, I think it's important that we do that. I pray that she straightens up, honestly, and has and has wisdom just to in the complex job, that she doesn't make it worse than it is. But it's
brilliant. All right, let's wrap it up. I'm going to promote Prayer and Pushback with Pat Mesiti and a whole bunch of other people that I'll be speaking on very soon. It's already started. Head to prayandpushback.com. It never hurts to have as many allies as possible, and this is going to be a great discussion for the next few hours about the resistance and Jesus as the center of the most important thing. Of course, there's some non-Christian people involved, but look, allies are allies. As long as you're anti-wickedness, then we're fighting for the same end, at least in the short term. And don't forget that this Saturday in Adelaide, the next Church and State Conference is happening, and we are going to be talking about what God wants for the election in South Australia, which is coming up in less than 6 months. And we just want to seek God. Say, God, what are the issues we should be voting for? Who's the best person to represent your heart? How do we love our neighbours the best? Like Solomon prayed, give us wisdom so that we can know the difference between right and wrong. That's this Saturday in Adelaide. The address to get more information about that is at christiansvote.com.au. christiansvote.com.au is where you can get your tickets. The last ones are just about gone, so make sure you grab them now. If it says they're available, they're available. Get it as quick as you can. And we look forward to seeing you in Adelaide this Saturday. Stay tuned to my social media pages, Dave Pellowe on Facebook, Instagram, and X, because there is going to be a youth and young adults event Friday morning. School holidays in Adelaide this week in South Australia. And we'll let you know where and when that will be, that I'll be teaching on great Australians and taking questions and answers and helping young people find Jesus as the solution and identity for the future of themselves as well as the nation. Reverend David Ould, let's throw to you to summarize the episode and your thoughts on how to save Australia.
One word, Jesus. He has had such a profound effect on not just Australia, but much of Western society, that the beginning of saving Australia, whether it's in the individual homes and lives or Australia as a whole, is understanding that influence. And when we do that and we see the goodness of what the Christian gospel has done for us culturally, we'll have a better way of starting to talk about what we want Australia to be in the future, and engage with some of those difficult conversations about culture and ethnicity and all those different things as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you, David, for your time, impromptu and ad hoc. And we will see you all the next time I randomly come on these airwaves. God bless you. Goodbye.
Our job as Christians is to let the light shine, but also resist evil. So you're a salt and light. And so without being activists on every issue, pick your issues very carefully, the ones that you really feel are bad for our society, and then take action.